the origins of the Russian Revolution. We'll change now the subject. Let's focus on Russia. Back to the beginning of the 20th century, before the First World War started, the Russian Empire still existed, and it was an absolute monarchy under the authority of a Tsar, an emperor, who held an absolute power as head of the state, head of the government, and head of the Orthodox Church. It existed a parliament, it was called Duma, but it had no power at all. Politically, there was no opposition to the Tsar, because people had neither individual nor political rights, of course. The economy of Russia was based on agriculture. The industrialization had started based on the railway and the heavy industry, and made the creation of a proletariat possible. However, most of the population were peasants, and these peasants lived under very hard conditions imposed by the nobility, who were the owners of the lands. Most of Russian population in urban and rural areas lived in poverty. So by the end of the 19th century, a kind of opposition started. This opposition against the Tsar produced different political parties, clandestine political parties. The Socialist Revolutionary Party, the Constitutional Democratic Party, and the Russian Socialist Democratic Workers' Party. The Socialist Revolutionary Party was made up of agricultural workers and wanted to collectivize lands. The Constitutional Democratic Party didn't want any revolution, just to transform Russia into a constitutional monarchy. And the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party split into two groups: the Mensheviks, who were moderate and wanted to make a gradual transition to a socialist system of government, and the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov Lenin, who were radicals and wanted to establish a proletarian dictatorship through a workers' revolution. Remember the first part of this unit, when we studied the imperialism. According to the imperialist ideas, Russia tried to expand its territory to the east, and that led into a conflict with Japan, and therefore to a war. Russia was defeated at this war, and at the same time suffered a hard economic crisis. The two facts together led to riots and finally to the revolution of 1905. This revolution started just a demonstration in January 1905. Just people went to the Tsar's palace, the Winter's palace, asking for better living conditions. Most of the demonstrators were women, children, and old men. A military force repressed the demonstration by shooting at the people, and plenty of people were killed. It was called the Bloody Sunday. People reacted, and strikes and more demonstrations happened everywhere. Peasants and workers met in assemblies to discuss the way of acting. These assemblies were called Soviets. Tsar realized the growing opposition, so he made few political concessions. The most important one was the decision of conforming the Duma via universal male suffrage, pretending his absolute monarchy was being transformed into a parliamentary monarchy, constitutional monarchy. These concessions were published in a manifesto, the October Manifesto. The Constitutional Democratic Party and the Mensheviks agreed to this manifesto. However, the Tsar continued ruling without Duma, so Russia continued being an absolute monarchy. The revolutions of 1917 and the Russian Civil War. The revolution of 1905 finished with the Tsar's conditions, but 9 years later, Russia joined the First World War, the Great War, and situation changed drastically. Food supplies were scarce, and soldiers and people were starving. At the same time, the German army was defeating the Russian armies, battle after battle. Soldiers were killed by thousands. People protested, and they were severely repressed. A demonstration on 8th March 1917 led to a revolution. The slogan was "Peace, Bread and Land." Workers went to a general strike, and soldiers mutinied. So a new government was formed. It was a moderate socialist government, led by Alexander Kerensky, aimed to establish a liberal political system. The Tsar, Nicholas II, did not agree with a liberal system, so he abdicated. But the new government faced different problems. One of them were the Soviets. These associations of workers, had their own paramilitary groups, and these were led by Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, by Lenin. Lenin wanted a more radical political change than Kerensky. Lenin returned to Russia from his 10 years exile in Zurich and proposed a new political program. It was called the April Thesis. This program was based on different measures: withdrawal from the war, redistribution of land among peasants, control of factories by workers' committees, autonomy for the national minorities, and Soviet government. Kerensky's provisional government reacted and accused Lenin of organizing a riot that happened in July. Lenin fled from Russia, although he was not the origin of this riot. Actually, this insurrection was originated in the bad living conditions that still existed in Russia and the defeats of the Russian army in the World War I. Anyway, Lenin went back to exile and fled from Russia. 3 months later, Lenin went back to St. Petersburg, now named Petrograd. There he joined the Soviet of Petrograd and claimed all the power to the Soviets. It was the beginning of the October Revolution. The Bolsheviks, who controlled the Soviets, took over the city and formed a new government. Kerensky went to exile. The new government took very important measures. Russia withdrew from World War I after signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Properties from the nobility were confiscated and its land distributed to the peasants. Factories were given to assemblies of workers to control, and the right of sovereignty was given to the different nationalities that existed in Russia. The Bolshevik government faced a huge opposition: Tsarists and liberals. The Tsarists, including land owners, military commanders, and the Orthodox Church, and the liberals, created an army to fight against the Bolshevik Revolution. It was called the White Army, that faced the government's one, the Red Army. A civil war started and lasted from 1918 to 1921, when finally the Red Army won the war. After the civil war, a communist dictatorship was established. The Bolshevik Party, now named the Communist Party, was the only legal one, the only one who held the power. All other political parties were completely banned. This communist dictatorship, this communist regime, will be the origin of the future conflicts in the world. It's the beginning of a new era, the beginning of new problems, and the beginning of our current world.